Thank you for joining the Missing Half podcast, where we're discovering what's missing in M&A, private equity, and growth. I have a very special guest with me today, Chris Miller, and I'm going to read this because there's a lot here, and then we're going to get into it. Our guest is Chris Miller. He's the Vice President of Digital Services at USALCO, where he's leading the digital transformation of the water treatment industry. Chris is focused on combining digital decision support solutions with specialty chemistry to help utilities achieve the highest standards of water quality, efficiency, and sustainability. And this role is a culmination of a career spent at the intersection of water, data, and engineering. He recently retired as an associate professor emeritus from the University of Akron after 3 decades of teaching water resources, engineering, and optimization. And before joining USALCO, he spent 10 years as an entrepreneur, founding and serving as the president and CEO of Fontus Blue, a company dedicated to improving drinking water quality through its advanced data monitoring and AI-driven software platform. Chris, thank you for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here.
I had to read all of that because you have had quite a journey here over the past several decades to arrive at this moment. Maybe talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my grandfather owned a construction company. So it's like kind of, a lot of people say, why civil engineering? It's like, so the plan was to go into the family business, run the construction company. That really was the extent of why civil engineering to start. But as that journey grew, I'm going to hit the mic already. Yeah. As that journey progressed, and then I thought, well, I'll be one of those transportation guys sitting on the road drinking coffee. Joined the Army, got in a construction unit, knew that construction was not for me, as my wife can attest that I do no home projects, even though I'm a 51 hotel, formerly trained in the Army. So, but was fortunate enough to get a job at the University Drinking Water Plant, and where my mom had actually been a secretary 20 years, when she was 20 years old, and they were just college students. So that was my first introduction. Was fortunate from there. There were a lot of grad students, and I knew I wanted to teach. Ended up in Akron, Ohio, and eventually led to founding Fontus Blue.
No, that's amazing. Thank you for your service. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
And so you tried construction and found water.
Yeah,
that's kind of an interesting transition. Let's talk about that founder experience of Fontus Blue. Every founder has that moment that they can think back to, or often we have several moments, but one we're willing to share. It was that white knuckle moment that we're on the precipice, the point of the knife of either success or failure. What was yours? What did you learn from it? How did you get through it? What would be words of wisdom to those of us or those who are founders who are trying to get through that moment?
I think I'll share 2. I think one that was specific to the technology or product is that this was in the within the first 2 years of the company. We were at the time selling an Excel sheet. I mean,
Sure.
And I didn't see that there was much future in continuing to, sell an Excel sheet. So it's like, what was going to be that major product advancement? Fortunately, there was what was called the Glide Innovation Fund in the Ohio area. And it was either $25,000 or $100,000. You went through a vetting process. You did interviews with and a presentation. So classic kind of startup pitch, but you really had to focus on the funds. Had to do my first pro forma. That ended up for the first time ever jumping us to the second one, which would normally be $100,000, but they split it with somebody else, and we got $50,000. Well, that $50,000 really was that quantum, like took us from a spreadsheet to being able to hire some people that got us into the cloud eventually,
Nice.
the cloud product. So, so I think that, the words of wisdom to founders is that, really seek out what those, every community is different in terms of how they support the entrepreneurial, but Ohio had invested a decent amount in having kind of cluster. And so there's Cleveland, Akron. And so tap into, those small resources. I wasn't a big fan of the startup pitch because this allowed us, like I said, we actually had to do a pro forma. We had to do, there was definitely some more gates that kind of accelerated us, hardening our business. I think the second one is kind of the classic. We had hired some people. It was about 4 years in, and we were burning cash faster than we could. And I had two amazing shareholders that stepped up and wrote checks. It was $100,000, $50,000 each, and now they're happy, as we'll get into that. What those culminated in, so having people that believed and were willing to write some checks and not go through a long process. I think the lesson there, again, obviously you can surround yourself with people that really believe and do have, at least some funds that can get you over some of those bumps that where unfortunately it could be meaning the business continues or doesn't continue.
I was listening to a podcast this morning on the way in, and it talked about founders need to do as much due diligence on their investors as whether it's private equity, whether it's private individuals, whatever it is, because if you run into those bumps in the road, like you had a situation where you had a bump in the road, you had investors who believed in the vision. So it wasn't purely a financial transaction, because if it was purely financial, they would have just been like, oh, I got to cut my losses and move on, right? They had to believe. So how important was it? Like, it sounds like it was like super important that you had those type of investors who believed in you and in the business more so than just the financial performance at that time.
Yeah. So I intentionally didn't choose those amazing people that had both. Yeah. So I was just very fortunate that that's what we attracted. So certainly I think that is, like you said, the due diligence on, and that's not what's usually emphasized, right? It's more or less who will write the
All
check.
takers.
And they also were very active board members, experienced business people, so that I'm sure we'll get into some of that helped also play a role besides, just getting us through that hump.
When you think about how you built this company, and we're going to get into it, you have successful transition, you're acquired. What were some of the biggest takeaways, like the biggest learnings that you had from that experience? Like, and maybe more of a macro, like founder life experiences or learnings that if you go back to Chris version 1.0 or 2.0, and now you're at Chris version 4.0, what were some of the things that you would never have thought of that just surprised the heck out of you?
Probably how much I did need other people to make it go. I mean, I think obviously if you have the entrepreneurial spirit and kind of a self-starter and, you think, well, I can probably do this a lot on my own. And I think you'll hear a lot about obviously hiring the right people. But I think that I was very fortunate. I mean, surrounded by, we were in, it was called Bounce Innovation Hub. Initially, it was the Akron Global Accelerator, but so there was a place so not only they provide economical rent, but there are actually people there that were interested in being mentors, advising. They assigned, an entrepreneurial lead. These people were with us the entire ride up until even the exit. So I think those key mentors, advisors, I guess I didn't realize that I needed a lot of them in the many different areas of marketing, sales. And so we quickly kind of corralled those. And I think I probably did it because I had the bootstrap mentality as well, is that like, I didn't want to fundraise and then hire all those areas. So I think that recognizing and they're not just employees and people that you hire to help build your business. There's a lot of, even board members. I didn't really fully understand and appreciate the difference between good board members and not so good board members. And I had amazing board members. So, and that had been through business cycles and had been through growth and those things. So I think I would definitely spend energy building that network. I think that's probably one of the key, certainly in the early stages there. And again, we were very fortunate to do that.
No, I think that's amazing because as founders, we think we can do it all. And early on, you have to do it all. Yeah. Because there's no money, there's no, scaling. You're just trying to get through the day,
Yeah.
get through the week, get through payroll. And then it's hard to identify when and how to make the transition to where you're bringing on those other experts or A players who you can in some ways delegate or hand off or partner with to execute those functions. And that's very, very difficult, especially whenever like when you started Fontus Blue, like you guys started it from zero. You didn't acquire something and roll it up or scale it up. You had an idea and you built it and you developed the MVP and you tested it and started to scale it. So I think that's a great perspective and kind of realization that you've observed and internalized as you've looked at this process.
I think, and probably one thing I would add is that one of the qualities certainly of probably at least 3 or 4 of those key people was they had done it.
Okay, nice.
So and then when I say done it, they'd either been in a key position of leadership for a startup, so they understood, that 5 employee to 15 employee, or whatever you want to define, but that kind of piece, or they had actually had an exit themselves. And another key quality is that they were not afraid to say, "Hey, Chris, get your act together," and be like, quit falling in love with the technology and focus on the financials and, do all those things that, create a sound business. So, so there's mentors that are supportive and there's mentors that aren't afraid to push you and tell you the truth. And we had a couple key ones on that front. So, and again, I remember those conversations to this day. So,
some of them live with you well, and some of them probably still not. You're like, how did I have to be told that? Why couldn't have I?
And they remember him though now when, like, one, he retired to Florida and we hadn't chatted for probably a year and a half. So when I texted him about the successful exit, he was, he remembered. He actually referred back to the conversation, knew where we were, and was like, "Yeah, Chris, you need to get off like pretend mode." That was the words he used. Yeah, do you pretend to have a business, or are you going to actually build a business? So
when I love that pretend mode. Often, and we run into this a lot because we work with a lot of like startups, founders, early like seed rounds, Series A. They have to have a moment where they stop falling in, like they fall out of love with, like maybe it's that honeymoon phase with the thing, and whether it's software or a process or a product or whatever, and recognize, okay, I do have to get out of pretend mode, and this is a business. This isn't romanticized. I'm going to have to make really hard decisions about this, and some of it I might have to kill so that the other part can grow and flourish. And those aren't fun moments, right? Because you want to believe you can make them all work, and every idea can't be optimized and scaled.
When I had like this overhanging, they're like, "Well, you are a professor, you have this full-time gig, and so is this a hobby?" So that was kind of the superficial way that, or not superficial, but definitely if you were having a conversation, like they could easily, if they were going to be a hardcore business, look at, they're like, "Well, you're subsidizing basically your business and doing all this stuff." So a lot of the conversations, even about how's this company going to grow, and with my board members, was, "Okay, Chris, when are you going to make the leap?" Right.
Sure.
And so that seems to be one of those like forks in the road. And I never did make the leap. And yet still, so it was, and I don't think it was that. I think it did at least allowed us to focus on, is this a viable business, and get away from whether or not I'm full-time. Because again, ask my wife, she was like, "Yeah, I was full-time." Couldn't tell, the trustees of the university or whatever, but I blended so much of what I did. I brought in the classroom, all that, so that it was very, very commingled, but still legal.
Sure.
But so that's
awesome.
what I thought. Engineering professors are supposed to bring real world problems into the classroom. So that's what I did. But
so let's talk about what is the problem that Fontus Blue and that you started to try and solve, and then how did you kind of walk that journey out as you built the company?
Yeah. So So I started at the University of Akron in 1995. So had been there about 5 or 6 years, came across this environmental working group report. My dog died of cancer and it only had Akron water. I mean, like, so just all of a sudden these little bulbs going off. So even though it was my formal area, like water treatment and was in that, I hadn't been exposed to, like, both at a personal level and then just even all of a sudden now at a local level, like, wait a second, the magnitude of, there's 300,000 people in Akron and they're drinking this water and they had no clue. And so there's definitely a water quality aspect. There were regulations that were coming that are always 10 to 15 years behind. One of my favorite sayings in the classroom was average is for losers. And maybe it came from is that, and after it sounds harsh, but it just means that we shouldn't aspire to average, right? Or as engineers, we shouldn't always just run the calculations as like the average is a good, it represents a mean, right? Or, okay. So anyway, they will sample. So you have this huge distribution system and they'll sample 300,000 people. How many locations do you think that they would sample to be representative of this whole huge area and 300,000 people?
So the central limit theorem would tell us we have to have 30, right?
Okay.
And my professor of statistics, Ron Walker, who made us memorize that definition, and we're not going to talk about how many years ago that was. We'll just say it was in a different millennia. So we need 30, but 30 out of 300,000 is great for a test in a college classroom to start approximations and standard deviations and all that, right? Not good enough for...
But so what's amazing is that, see, professor had an impact on you. That is actually, but so because of cost and other factors, it's only 12.
What?
Yeah, 12. Yeah, and here's it. When they sample those 12, they will average, so the compliance number is 80. Well, you'd have from 30 to 120, and they would just be like, so as long as the average came under 80, you were in compliance. Well, guess what? I didn't want to be the one drinking 130, 5 or 6, that
Sure.
was definitely. So US EPA recognized that they couldn't have this averaging. They actually, all 12 sites have to meet the 80. So that was the big regulation change. So, well, that caused all kinds of dominoes because now you had 3 or 4 sites that were in violation, which meant the whole system's in violation. And so that's what shows up at your tap. And I had expertise in modeling water quality in these big systems. And it just led me back to the source, which is, hey, if we treat it to a higher level at the plant, and then when we distribute it, we'll be fine. Kind of a basic hypothesis. So I knew I needed to get into treatment optimization. But so really a nice regulatory shift, obviously a health impact that was real. These are known carcinogens. It's not like they're suspected or all that. And so, and then you had finally the piece, like, who's the core customer? So you have water operators that are legally responsible for making these chemical adjustments and keeping the compliance. Now, they don't go to jail if they're in violation or whatever, but their system, they're the ones responsible, and they have to make these tough chemistry-based treatment decisions. And I'm sitting there going, I've got a Ph.D. in engineering, I've got all this expertise, and I wouldn't want to be making those decisions. So,
because those decisions have real impact.
They have impact, and they're complicated. I mean, they're chemistry, they're hydraulics, and I'm like, many times now, they'd be high school educated. So I'm just saying, and I'm like, I wouldn't want to be on the hook for making these decisions. So, there was not a software tools to help them make those decisions, and with the regulations on the move, I knew it was only going to get worse, that are more complicated for them. So that really was, hey, let's build an Excel sheet at first that could help meet that.
So this is more of a comment or a question on the water world that we live in. No reference to the movie implied or expected, but when we think about something that every person on the planet deals with air and water and food. And it feels to me like as I'm more exposed to the water community, it is so archaic the way we deal with water on a consistent basis, especially drinking water. And because if and what you're saying is completely true, we're supposed to have folks who work at these water facilities without PhDs in chemistry, without all of these tools at their beck and call and experience and education, and making fairly complex decisions, and also making them based on sampling protocol that is not going to give them the right parameters.
Yeah.
So you have multivariate analysis. You have so many variables that are not controllable in any of those calculations. The potential for disaster there seems to me to be really large.
Well, Flint was simply removing one chemical from the mix, the corrosion inhibitor. And then you had,
You went from
and no, and Toledo had the harmful algal bloom sort of crisis where, again, it was really they have a multi-barrier approach usually with treatment, so that you're not relying on one thing.
Sure.
Okay, that's usually how they're built. Well, we've realized that even the multi-barrier, sometimes those will go in tandem and go the wrong direction, and all of a sudden those barriers are gone, or there's something in direct conflict with that. And if you get a perfect storm of certain things, you're basically trying to minimize, not eliminate, the risk.
Sure. So with Fontus Blue, you've identified the problem. You're at a point where you see this regulatory shift, and you're starting to see an analysis tool take form. And for those younger listeners, Excel was like Google Sheets or something you used before everything was in the cloud, right? So some of them will be like, what's Microsoft?
Yeah, Google Sheets. Yeah, I forget. Yeah, yep. Exactly. A spreadsheet.
Yeah,
yes.
Spreadsheet. So you have this pilot. You're going to market with a solution to deal with this regulatory issue to hopefully make more efficient and consistent processes for these operators. And now it's time to put on the business hat and say, okay, how much should we expect out of this company? What should we invest in it? What's the total addressable market? What's the roadmap forward? Maybe talk about the transition from problem identification solution to now we're going to try and scale this up and make a business out of it.
Yeah. So, very concrete things, having that space that you're paying rent for. Like, to me, this really was the simple sort of transition was, and I remember exactly when that was. So on June 1st of 2017, we actually got 300 square feet in the Bounce Innovation Hub. And Caleb Sprague was employee number one, who still with me. We opened that office. And so, and prior to that, we had a few clients. So we at least had enough bootstrap that could support Caleb and support rent. So having somebody working on the business truly full time, that also was one of those key milestones. So even though I was, again, 70, 80%, but
Sure.
having another person, then when I wasn't working and thinking about the business, I knew that was critical. But so one of the persons that had helped develop the pilot was, it worked for me at the university. His name's Chickleth, who's employee number two and still with us. He was literally 30 days from his visa expiring, going back to India. And I was like, oh, wow. So we actually took on Chickleth at that same time and, started now. So now three of us meet on a regular basis, starting to think about client acquisition success, sales, marketing is extremely overwhelming, for sure. But so I've lost a little bit of the train of thought there, though, Billy. In terms of that was a key transition.
Sure.
So again, as simple as making payroll, paying rent. Okay.
Real, right?
Yeah, it got real, and so I think Now I guess what led up to that, though, is that we did have enough sort of traction from these first adopters that were like, hey, you've got something here. So I think we needed a little bit of wind at our back that was like, so we could spend the energy thinking about, yeah, okay, how do we actually now build out a team? And we use that glide funding to take us to the cloud, which certainly one of the things, I don't know how much we'll get into depth on this, but early on I was like, I want to have a product that can support, especially smaller utilities. So we talk about large utilities may have a water quality compliance manager and may have, so they have some levels of expertise in these things. You get down to even cities under 15, 20,000 people. And
Sure.
so we needed to have something that didn't require a big, huge project and enterprise software kind of mindset. So we decided, obviously cloud, but we also decided we want to be able to deploy it without having to even go visit and meet people in person. So, which was actually, I said 2017, which is actually a good business decision once COVID hit in 2020. We were already in that model, and it actually made it more adaptive to building relationships and trusting software at a distance.
Did you determine that you wanted to go to the cloud, not only for those other like financial reasons, but from a usability and adoption standpoint? Because it sounds like, okay, if we want the enterprise route, we need the support of possibly IT from the water organization. And that, like you said, that's going to be a very small total addressable market, right? Probably a smaller percentage of all of the water facilities in the country. So how did you determine that? Was it voice of customer research? Like, were you interviewing, or was it your experience in the industry that you knew these were characteristics of these organizations at the different levels throughout the country? Or how did you go from, okay, we're solving a problem, but now to understand the TAM and customize this solution to the total addressable market, this is the path we need to choose because of these inputs or these validation points from the market? How did you get there?
Probably very fortunate that being a professor and being in an environment where things are transitional. So I saw going from, your PC, like even education was like, wait a second, how do we support students in their learning? And like, so I think part of that is I just translated to be able to see that, wait a second, people are going, we were already going from, individual student licenses where they put Excel on their computers to cloud-based. So I think so it was totally different environment, but
Sure.
I saw enough cross connections to be like, wait a second.
There's something here.
Software is going to go to the cloud. And like you said, not because, you don't need IT. Although IT was always the biggest pain in the what at the university and their control structure. But and they started to lose control when things went to the cloud. But so I think that helped, is seeing how, again, even though it's a different, I'm supporting students in their learning, we're supporting operators in their learning and decision making. So how you deploy those tools, and I think I just saw that connection and was like, okay, things are going to go that direction.
When, for the younger listeners, who will, I'm sure, like my eldest son will ask me about this, and he gets it. The idea of not being in the cloud or making a decision about going to the cloud in 2017 was not as like straightforward as it is today in 2025. Like now in 2025, everything's in the cloud. We can use all these new AI tools, and like these kids can vibe code, and in 3 days they can build what it would have taken us 2 years to build back then, and millions of dollars in 2017. So like that decision was very forward thinking in that space, because it's my understanding, I don't deal with a lot of the water operators, but a lot of them are still working on computers that everything is native on the Microsoft Office license with Excel, which is a spreadsheet tool that isn't cloud-based, or can be if it's in 365. But the point is, like, it's still almost like the old filing cabinet system, not in the cloud, applications, login, the whole 9 yards.
And water, it's not uncommon to go in and see on their whiteboard where they'll put, so first off, that's where they'll put like the latest chemical set points to remind them. But they'll have a sheet that's basically like, hey, if the water quality coming in today is this is where we should dose. And that's not uncommon. And so, um,
Somewhat frightening
yeah, yeah.
as a
And
consumer.
yeah. And again, they still make compliance, but it certainly shows that, um, and there's also the cybersecurity concern. There's some of those things that have happened that they don't want to be connected to the cloud. But I think they've hidden behind that because, of course, there are secure ways to consume. Because I'll go in and they'll be like, we're totally cyber secure. We don't. And then meanwhile, the operator will have a computer open and they're on, Google, right? I mean, and then doing something, and I'm like, that's connected. And, even though,
They're checking their fantasy football
yeah,
team.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
nothing can come in through those channels.
Yeah.
And they're clicking on emails and they don't have good filters and all. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I think the thing that I'm finding with the most successful founders and those who've had incredible exits is there is an insatiable desire and focus on the customer and their problem and making sure, like the fact that you have anecdotes of seeing those whiteboards. You weren't sitting in a glass house somewhere, like cooking up this idea and then trying to impose your idea on the market. You identified a problem. You recognized the people who would be using the solution and their day-to-day activities, how they behave, the tools that they did or did not have available to them, and then like brought those two things together. That to me feels like the story or part of the story of the success of Fontus Blue is making sure that you brought those two things together. And that's where I see a lot of these fall apart, is where like they have an idea and they don't understand the market, and then they miss. So that to me is just and whether you got that feedback back through, like some people who like go into it without a lot of background in an industry do that voice of customer research. You had so many touch points through your teaching career and dealing with those folks that gave you that information to make those decisions and really guide the development of Fontus Blue.
Yeah. And, it's of course like anything, hindsight's 2020, right? So my journey as an engineering student, and then like I said, through Ph.D., then all of a sudden becoming on the other side, having to guide both undergrads and so a lot of that empowering individuals, and it was fundamental even in the accreditation process when they look at engineering programs, is how are you using modern tools? Well, I was the head of accreditation and doing all this, and so like I always was like, well, how are we using modern tools and how could we do it better? And so a lot of that just was part of my day-to-day job, and then just kept seeing those cross correlations to, wait a second, these operators. So again, I think engineering students are producing a good engineer isn't just going through the curriculum and do it. Like there are a lot of nuanced aspects. And I was like, wow, wait a second, developing an engineer, developing a water operator using modern tools, like
Sure.
a lot of that is just like, wow, there's really good alignment in that, and people come in at different levels. They come, all that again, like in adapting software as well as even how do we support them with our people as well. Like, so there was, I said sometimes I call it we're water therapists sometimes with these operators. So we listen to them, and it is
you're
separate
sitting
from
there
the service. Yeah.
polishing the glass,
Yeah.
listening to their woes. Like,
Yeah. So there's a component of that that's, empathy is sure, but yeah. So, yeah.
So, Chris, in the pre-show, we talked a little bit about the journey. And you mentioned, one of the things you mentioned, and so this is a Missing Half podcast. We're trying to discover what's missing and what you've learned from mistakes or from missed opportunities. And you had mentioned that you feel and this is primarily about marketing and growth and sales. You mentioned that you didn't invest in marketing soon enough. And in hindsight, you wish you or would, if you were counseling someone else who's going through a similar journey, to invest in that more quickly. Could you maybe unpack that and talk a little bit about where you think you could have maybe achieved better performance? If you had, or what caused you to say that, and why did you identify that gap?
Yeah. So, and even since we talked, I definitely reflected some more, and I'd forgotten about. So I think it's kind of like this parallel part. So investing, and then I'm thinking about the investing part of, some cash out of the bank, hiring people. Like we oftentimes, again, that whole, do you hire
Sure.
or do you get consult piece? And so we definitely were in the let's get a consultant, let's do, and part of we did it not only was to manage budget, was so we could learn, because we were very green to even the whole concept of marketing, which gets to my other part about like really learning core principles of marketing
Sure.
and the terminology, and I get it, that sounds kind of textbook, but at the time that you're going through, if you make an investment, you don't have at least some core background. I don't think you get the full benefit of going through those different stages of like, okay, let's create a product sheet or a core message, or like, so you hear those things, but again, that's kind of like you learn engineering better by doing some real stuff rather than examples. So we had a couple of those small engagements that I think were good catalysts for our learning. I mean, so which I think when the pre-show I hadn't, but we really, the first big investment, we committed to a retainer type and had like basically fractional, and that's what I'm saying. I wish I had done that piece sooner.
Sure.
So where I knew it wasn't a specific job, it wasn't specifically like, let's, do the V1 of the website or whatever. Like it was actually somebody that was going to be like, hey, I will own pushing you through those different stages and getting in. So I wish Heather, is her name, she was amazing. Heather actually got us into, we were finalists for one of the tech awards up in Cleveland. And
Nice.
so she would do all these kinds of things that were multifaceted. And so I think that obviously, and that was not an unbearable amount of
Sure.
funds. And so that, so again, somebody that was doing it full time, or or at least pushing us through those stages and hurting us through those stages, because that was certainly not going to be me, and it
Sure.
wasn't going to be Caleb or Chickleth. And
You had things you had to attend to.
and a mentor. Again, mentors were good. Even we had one of our best, Mark Korsten, who's was with us all the way through. Was a VP of marketing when he retired. He was ironically an electrical engineer by formal training for Keithley Instruments. But I wasn't going to expect Mark to run our marketing, right? He could advise and, help support those certain aspects and be like, yeah, I think that's going right, or here's, but yeah. So I think getting somebody that's doing it on a regular basis, and I think there's, I think what you do, there's some really good people that can do that, and that was, it was huge beyond just client acquisition. It's, marketing's more than just generating leads. Right. And so, I appreciate that, because I never was like, I want this person so that I can get 10 leads. And I was actually worried about that, because I was, how the heck are we going to deliver the software to have 5 new clients? But yeah, but that definitely, all those aspects of marketing that are important and critical, and having somebody shepherd all those was, and I guess I wish we had done it sooner.
So one of the things we see that's missing with a lot of startups and even larger corporations is they treat some of these things as point and shoot, and they're over, like, okay, let's get the website done. Well, especially when you're a startup, like there's changes on the ground every day, and you need to be able to test and react and move and make something happen. And whether it's, if you're working on brand and you're really trying to get that next investment round, so like the stakeholders are more the investors, or if it's new client acquisition, or both, or all of those things, that these are dynamic levers that have to be pulled, and capital has to be deployed like it in marketing, just like it does in product development, just like it does in staff. because we're trying to create value. We're not there to just, oh, well, we have a light bill, we have an insurance bill, and yeah, we should probably spend X% on marketing because that's what everybody does. No, that's for big companies that don't really participate in the same bootstrapping and startup space or PE space that we operate in. And we see that whenever you have that like fractional CMO, the one who can really guide those things and stick with you through the wins and the losses, because there will be many of both, and also then get the tactical delivery done. That seems to be a more efficient path. But it is one of the things we see that's missing is it's very difficult to make that financial investment and believe in that, because it's not going to happen in 30 days. And it's a core function that has to be invested in, just like product or engineering or R&D or whatever. So no, we hear that a lot. I don't know what the answer to that is. I don't know how to solve that for founders, because I get it. You're at that moment where there's this much cash and there's this much month left at the end of the cash if you do all the things you want to do, right? It's kind of like that Walmart analogy of there's too much month left at the end of the money. That's why Walmart says their share price is down. Anyway, that's way above my pay grade.
But I think that it also, I stumbled across getting happy clients, that kind of moving backwards from sometimes if you think traditionally, so you market to generate leads, those leads are passed to sales close the business, give it off to success, that's kind of the linear way. But in terms of building the business, and I kind of adhered to it, I adhered to it, was working backwards. So we, or at least we jumped to the product part client, then we figured out what we price on. So I think that you must, no matter what, you must invest in the marketing. I was okay with how we knew though that it was where the pain of our clients not understanding our value prop and our core message, and that was the triggers to be and that's not sales, right? And so I think we use that feedback loop, and then finally the pain just reached enough of a threshold that and it wasn't, and we knew it wasn't those incremental projects like you talk about. It wasn't get a product sheet, get a case study, get a website. We knew it was deeper than that. And probably one of the themes we'll also talk about is, once I realized that, I knew we needed to act, and I would say act like a big company where we have, and so I think it's one of the key themes and why we were able to do eventually what we did, is that we did that we bought Salesforce when there were only 4 of us. And people were like, why are you getting Salesforce? I was like, well, we need to build the infrastructure and, we vetted, we looked, and we did. We were like, wait a second, it wasn't just because it was the most expensive. It was long term.
It's the most scalable.
Yeah, that was the long term, and you knew the interoperability and a lot of these other things, we vetted it through. And so, likewise, I was like, hey, we need to have consistent, and all the good marketing benchmarks of a really solid company. And, even again, learning that terminology of inbound and outbound. Well, okay, we still have not really crushed inbound. That's one of our focus next year. But so I know what it is. I know what but that's also matching up that you have to be able to execute on any lead, whether it's outbound or inbound. And so now I trust our ability, or not trust, but the sales team can handle those things. But yeah.
No, I think that there's a couple of things you said that are just so spot on. One, we are platform agnostic, right? We just want to find the right tool for our clients to use to help them. But I do believe in buying the tool you need a year from now and 2 years from now, not the tool you need today.
Yeah.
Because I've run into so many situations, both internally in our companies and with our clients, where, okay, let's get the cheapest thing we can do to hit that nail on the head today. Jobs to be done through, okay, let's get that job done. But then 6 months from now, we're stopped in our tracks because we have to make a platform move, and we can't just add on features. So our project management system is Reich. Reich could put people on the moon, it's got so many features. We probably use like 5% of it. But when we started, we were using 1% of it. And we've gotten up to 5 and gotten really efficient, but we didn't have to then vet a new platform. So your Salesforce decision, I love that. I'm having some of those conversations on renewals with like HubSpot right now with some of our clients where they're like, well, we're not really using this to the fullest capability and for what we're paying for. I'm like, yeah, but if you call me next Tuesday and say, oh, we want to go after ABM and we don't have a tech stack problem. We can, that's already solved. We just spin it up. We maybe rent another component or whatever. And like, we're moving forward as opposed to, oh, we're going to have a 3 to 6 month conversation with IT and all the other decision makers to figure this all out. So I commend you on the Salesforce decision. Love that. And that I'm sure has paid dividends.
Yeah. And whether, again, seeing other startups, again, I think a good CEO is very obviously aware of their surroundings. So being in an environment where other startups sharing stories, then also again, back to the university where they're always doing that. Do we build or do we buy the enterprise of Blackboard? I almost go through all the educational platforms, right, that have come and gone, and, Brightspace or D to Learn, that. And so I even was on some of those committees. And so I think, yeah, that some of those scars and seeing, how that those decisions are made in the short term versus long term, a lot of what you said. Yeah. And so we definitely were, again, would say we want to, the more technical ways of build a foundation for scaling. But we would joke, we want to act like we're a much bigger, and that at least created that culture of thinking again. And that even though we're 5, how will it be when we're 50 or whatever it may be, right? And not.
You just want to be able to hit that button and then there's another one as opposed to a whole shift. The other thing you mentioned there, and this shocks me to this day, as I deal with a lot of founders looking for that Series A round and like getting really ready to try and scale up and attract investments. You hit the nail on the head, and so many people are missing this. When you have a marketing problem, you need to look at the whole, everything, brand. You need to look at your tech stack. You need to look at your go-to-market. You need to look at inbound. You need to look at outbound. You need to look at your content marketing. And we get a lot of inquiries like, yeah, we're not happy with our website. And I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about what kind of company you are. Okay, and what are you doing? Oh, we're approaching Series A. And we're talking about your website. Okay, we can start there. But my guess is that's not the problem. That is a symptom that you're seeing, but there's a much deeper problem because you haven't identified your TAM. You haven't like segmented your market. Your messaging is off. Your branding is a problem. And not that we're advocates of spending millions of dollars on big idea brand, like, that big logo and slogan and treatment and all that, because I personally think a lot of that is wasted. Like we need to get down in the weeds and make something happen and drive value. Use marketing as a capital lever that can generate value, not just spend it for fun.
Yeah.
So your recognition of marketing as a problem or opportunity, as opposed to, we're not on social media. Our YouTube channel is behind the times. Our website isn't performing appropriately, and then recognizing that confusion of the value proposition in the market. How did you arrive at recognizing that marketing was a problem, not just like, the website or those little tactics that so many people focus on?
Well, again, I have to give an extra shout out again to Mark Horston. So Mark, like I said, and actually he always likes to put down civil engineers. He's electrical engineer. He's like, that's how we got to space. That's how we've done everything.
Sure.
Mark would, right, let's say. So
the pecking order of engineers.
Yeah. And all I have is, Hoover, that there was a president, right? And we know how that all, but so.
That's great.
But so Mark had both that technical chops but he had those core principles that he would definitely hit us on, and the 5 whys and those things. So, somebody that we could keep bringing us back to what was important and not that superficial noise of like, how good is your logo? How good is your website? A lot of that shiny stuff that does detract early, founders. And And again, recognizing that it is a fundamental component of the business, as you said, not a necessary spend. And I think even like Google AdWords and all that, like even a lot of stuff you see reinforces almost that like, oh, if we spend $500 or we spend 5,000, we'll just make, 10 times as much. And, it's like, wait a second. Yeah, that's not marketing.
Yeah,
So,
every digital platform goes through a life cycle, and Google's there, Meta's there, TikTok, and YouTube. All of them go through a life cycle of scrappy, effective, cutting edge to the ultimate outcome is if you spend more with me, your life will be better. Because I have never seen a recommendation like in Google AdWords that says spending less is the right answer. Right. It's always more. And like, oh, hit this button and more.
Yeah.
And it's easy. Like you just click on it with your mouse, $500 more is gone. Does anything happen? Who knows? But yeah, that is not marketing. That's just ad spend.
Yeah.
And it's this whole movement of AI impacting that may actually, they may eat their own.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not worried as a marketer about AI because we still have to solve problems. We're going to use the tools.
Yep.
The platforms may be at greater risk, and there may be more efficiency. I believe there will be more efficiency we can extract from the market with the tools in. Just like the internet killed newspaper, radio, and TV and the monopolies they had, we're going to see AI drive additional efficiency and extract value for companies out of those monopolies. Let's call them what they are.
Yeah.
Well, let's pivot here a little bit, Chris, because let's kind of, we started in the middle of the story, and now and we referred to the end of the story or the next chapter, and you had a successful exit, and you are now part of the USALCO family. Maybe talk about that. Talk about USALCO. We're all for shameless plugs, and promoting where we are in our companies. So maybe talk about that exit and then what you're doing now with USALCO in your role there.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, now the VP of Digital Services, USALCO has even themselves. They started out in the late 70s, family owned, Baltimore. Making coagulant, one of the core chemicals in drinking water treatment. Fast forward 50 over that they've been many acquisitions and a lot of times more regional. But so from one facility to now 33 facilities, like predominantly east of the Mississippi, but two in California, one that's going to go online in early 2026. So 1/3 of the country drinks water treated with USALCO coagulant. So, not trivial. So, it's pretty good. Some of that's through distributors. A lot of it's direct. So that was the core business, 5 decades. And they knew that they wanted to expand into services and digital. And so that was really the driving force for acquiring Fontus Blue. And so now that's my core role, is take this business that's been at that and help lead and work with an amazing group of people, awesome leadership. That was one of the things that attracted us to to merging together. It was Ken Geyer that would always say, I don't like the word acquisition. He's like, this is a partnership. This is a merger. Even though, we're like, he come, it's just and that's the kind of, how Ken really views it and so that just kind of permeates the entire leadership team. So now we're looking, basically matching or marrying everything we talked about that Fontus Blue's vision and mission is creating these tools so that operators could produce high quality, sustainable, water operations. And so no deviation whatsoever in the vision and the mission of the companies. Almost seemed too perfect, honestly, for the match. So we're some of the things we've talked about that are afoot just in the world in general, agentic AI, and how our operators going to do that. And so building making hopefully that digital match at least become maybe a bigger piece of that pie. So now I've been exposed to being owned by, TJC, who are actually amazing partners. I even realized they have a whole group that supports their portfolio companies. So the dynamics of even more resources with the company, but even of, the firm that
Sure.
that owns them. So there's uh, uh, I think we built over 8 years to be ready for this moment so that we're not overwhelmed with, wait a second, you need to deliver. We want to deliver this now
Sure.
and do all these things. And, they were a Salesforce organization. Yeah. So and by the way, they actually, one of the things that attracted was that we were doing things uh, more systematically than they were.
Oh, wow.
And we were 10 and they're 550 people. And so, we've started adopt some of our uh, processes.
Nice.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So you're a disruptor. You're a challenger brand that's like, kind of forging new pathways in bringing digital solutions to the water community. You have a large, very large organization that is supplying that community with materials, and that marriage of bringing that product plus, the digital product plus the coagulant product together to form better outcomes. It seems like a great marriage. Like, it seems like there's a value proposition that you and the folks at USALCO thought about this, and it made a ton of sense. This wasn't like a side project. This was a completely aligned and available to be integrated rapidly with the vision of both companies.
Yeah. Spot on. And one of the things I didn't even, because there are other coagulant providers, right? So one of the things that through their acquisition and through actually Jim, who's going to retire soon, actually has the patents on some of these coagulants. Their blends and their ability to customize, because a lot of coagulants viewed kind of as a commodity business. You can buy alum from this competitor, buy it from USALCO, right? So, but they have the ability to be like, we can actually provide a custom blend that matches your source water and your challenges and the things you're trying to do, and now provide this digital tool. So it really not only the kind of the synergy, but it's nobody that can compete with that kind of comprehensive offering. And again, back to the regulatory challenges, so the coagulant is one of the key levers in all these current challenges and even the ones that are on the horizon. So it's basically fundamental to be able to do that. So we actually, I think, are going to increase coagulant use because it's a cost-effective way to target these things. So when originally built our software, it was oriented towards thinking of optimization as reducing. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Sure, yes.
Like it's kind of like we think of gas mileage means we're going to, our gas will go further. Well, we're actually going to flip that script, is that the level of service that our clients have to provide has gotten more challenging.
Sure.
So it's good old marketing messaging, right? You know what I mean? It's like, so the bar is higher. So the issue is, how much more do you have to spend, or how much more do you have to treat the water? Well, we'll help make sure that it's the right amount. So it's going to be more.
But how?
Yeah. And it's not because obviously we want to sell more coagulant, which, by the way, we've gotten that question from a few of our clients. Like, are you going to change your algorithm so that it support? I was like, that'd be really hard, right? I was like, ours is just, since it's fundamental chemistry, we just actually now we have all the blends, we can just plug it in. But yeah. So,
I think the proof so this was a point I was going to bring up, and this is, I think, the right time to answer that question, is the proof is in the outcomes that Fontus Blue is generating for their clients. When you look at the proof points on your marketing material currently of time saved, chemical costs saved, and I think the reality is, what do we all want? What is the outcome of everything we're talking about here from a market standpoint is everyone wants really good, clean, affordable drinking water. How we get there, whether it's, and you'll probably see this variability on the curve, right? We'll go back to it. Some places will need more of X, others will need more of Y. But if we're actually testing more than 12 samples and we're testing consistently, and then we're applying these materials consistently to the water, we are going to have better outcomes for, and hopefully, in our lifetime, we'd never have another Flint.
Yep.
Right. Hopefully we are the shining star in the world as a country. Hopefully we could get things like water right.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
We haven't yet, but we're trying. So I think that's amazing. And I think the beauty of answering that question to your clients is the market is way too efficient to ever allow that to occur, because there's too many competitors, there's too much information out there, all of those things. So making the right recommendation, and we find this with our business. I always have conversations at some point in time, usually a year in or a year and a half in with a client, where I'll say, this may get me fired, but I'm going to tell you exactly what we believe to be true and give you our best recommendation. And you might not like that, and it might make you mad enough to fire us. So be it. But we're going to tell you the truth. And Fontus Blue is telling the truth about what's happening in these water facilities and these samples and how to make water better. As long as that mission is job one, you'll never fail.
But marketing principles actually helped me not feel rejected when I knew they were saying no, but I told you it was a not yet, right? Like, because that's coming to your door, where all of a sudden you're going to get a new utility service director that's like, wait a second, why? Like you can stay in your silo, you know what I mean? But and see, and see, but like this, it's unavoidable that these core challenges are going to come knocking, or the senior operator that you've relied on forever retires, and all of a sudden, or whatever, like it. And so awareness, right? I mean, all those things are I was like, wait, that's so cool. They're not at that right part of it, but they're aware of us now, that we've educated them. And, so again, sorry to bring it back to Mark,
no, but that's exactly right.
But I understand those things now. And it's like, and so that was not a wasted effort. I was kind of binary in the early days as a founder, about you win or lose. And it's like, no, there's a lot of winning that happens that you just don't sow. Yeah, you don't sow that. And again, sales cycles and, all of those things. So
when adoption is hard. And I think one of the things we're seeing, not only in water, but across our entire economy, is as we see the baby boomers move on, and all of that intellectual capital is not being replaced. And, young people don't want to spend 20 years in a career. They don't want to spend a long time learning something. We have to find solutions like this that can help us achieve outcomes. And I'm sure there's a distribution on that too, because you have some of those folks who are really good performers and then some who are not. So hopefully if we can raise the entire bar by a single solution or a group of solutions that make it equal across, so we're getting more samples, so we're doing it the right way every time consistently, we can actually have those better outcomes.
Well, I won't name the company, but I know that they've made part of their standard exit process when people retire is that, and I forget the exact details, but they literally are putting them through like 8 to 10 hours of interviews, and guess what they're doing? They're videoing it, they're transcribing it. They're like trying to at least do some of like get it into it. And they've actually now built their agents to, and they crafted them for different, obviously whatever those functions and jobs.
Sure.
But like to even think about that and making it part of, again, a standard exam is pretty forward thinking for that company and makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, when you have institutional memory that you're trying to capture and make that part of, and now we can capture it quickly, we can build it in with AI. Those are quantum leaps that are going to be amazing. Well, we're at an hour and 15 minutes, and I feel like we started about 2 minutes ago. Chris,
Me as well.
this has been a fantastic conversation. Would like to give you the opportunity to just kind of promote yourself and where people can find you online, and all of these details will be shared in the show notes, all the posts and that type of thing. Is it primarily LinkedIn and your website? How can we find you?
Yeah. So, uh, and again, we didn't actually tech too much, but USALCO's gone through this wonderful rebranding. But so it's USALCO. So just like it sounds, USALCO.com. And I would say soon, January or so, we'll have some pretty cool rebranding. But yes, LinkedIn, Chris Miller, USALCO. I put all my contact info, which is why I think I get so much spam on my mobile phone, right? The scrapers, if, or whatever I discovered. But yeah, and certainly founders, others reach out, more than welcome to try and give back a little bit on the founder's journey. So.
Well, Chris, congratulations. It has been an amazing story to talk about. I'm sure you're very pleased to have lived it and in some ways look back on it. Not experience every step of it again. But congratulations on what you've done with Fontus Blue and now with USALCO.
Thank you.